Imagine being the rightful ruler of an empire, only to have your psychotic twin brother lock you in a golden cage. To keep Princess Raha broken, the tyrant emperor sends her a twisted gift every single night, a male slave to warm her bed. Most of these disposable dolls don't survive until morning, but then he arrives. Shane is a fallen holy knight with messy silver hair, a beautifully scarred body, and eyes full of pure hatred. Raha is ready to let his hatred kill her. But when the bedroom doors lock, the broken slave pins her down and makes a terrifying vow. He doesn't want her life. He desires her as his ultimate prize. This is the princess bedroom doll. In the storied Delo Empire, the only nation blessed by the gods, a unique power marks the true ruler. The faded blue eyes, a divine gift, are a symbol meant only for the emperor. This power is absolute, with the strength to protect not just the chosen successor's life, but the entire empire. This incredible destiny falls upon Princess Raha. A memory flashes, a small girl collapsing under the weight of her fate, while her young brother, Karzan, watches with a hard expression, his hand clenching into a tight fist. Despite lacking the faded blue eyes of succession, Crown Prince Karzan is placed upon the throne by his father. To solidify his half-legitimate rule, the new emperor wages brutal campaigns of conquest, a cruel smirk on his face as his power grows. Under the tyrant's merciless boot, some victims volunteer for a dangerous project, an attempt to forge a human weapon capable of defeating Karzan. Amidst the devastation, a young man with silver hair kneels, a product of their desperation. However, their efforts do not unfold as they had planned. In a vast, dark hall, a man with striking blue hair drags defeated bodies behind him, tossing them onto a growing pile. One of the men cries out in fear, but the captor just smirks. "Come now," he says coolly. "I haven't even ended you yet." He turns his chilling gaze upon the kneeling high priests. With a look of pure contempt, he asks why they tremble so violently. He reveals their secret plot, a laboratory built to bring about his downfall while he was away conquering other nations, completely unaware of their betrayal. Emperor Karzan feigns disappointment, his voice laced with sarcasm as he questions how the priests could conduct such experiments before the gods. He pins a man to the floor with his boot, the captive choking beneath the pressure. Karzan explains that he can't simply end such sacred men. Instead, he will take their experimental subjects and prepare a gruesome feast in their honor. A high priest collapses to his knees, his voice cracking as he begs for mercy. Karzan laughs softly, his eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "Mercy," he repeats. "Very well." Karzan's idea of mercy is a cruel one. A wicked smile plays on his lips as he reveals his plan. He will select the priest's finest experimental subjects and offer them to his sister as servants. A cold dread washes over the high priest. Karzan gestures grandly, extending an invitation for them to witness the presentation themselves, all in the spirit of reconciliation. Suddenly, his sword clatters to the stone floor. The scene shatters. Guards lie defeated in a hallway. A voice cuts through the silence, demanding to know, "Where is Raha?" Princess Raha drifts through a misty courtyard, a quiet wish for freedom, for anyone but herself, on her lips. Her steps halt. In the dim light of the dungeon, a man kneels before her, hands bound, his muscular back a canvas of old scars. This is Shed. He heard the whispers of vengeance against the emperor and volunteered for this path. He lifts his head, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. The cold air between them suddenly crackles with an unspoken heat. His gaze is a silent challenge, a storm of defiance in the face of despair. Raha feels a strange warmth spread through her, a quickening pulse that answers the unspoken intensity in his eyes. Raha considers the chained man before her. He is from a fallen land, another captive destined for her private chambers. A quiet despair settles in her heart, but then a desperate thought cuts through the gloom. Believing there is a slim chance this could help, she brings a finger to her mouth. A sharp sting is followed by the coppery taste of her own resolve. She leans down, pressing her lips to his. A sudden, warm light envelopes them as their connection deepens. Below, Shed's chained hands clench into tight, trembling fists. A soft exhale escapes Raha's lips as the ethereal light around them fades. She pulls away, her hand pressing a cloth to Shed's mouth as he flinches from the touch. She insists he not spit it out, her voice a sharp, desperate whisper. Standing, she pleads with him one last time, her own hand clenching a brittle branch she's taken from the floor. Suddenly, a cold voice shatters the silence, calling her name. Raha freezes, her eyes widening in terror. Emperor Karzan stands silhouetted in the doorway, demanding to know what she is doing. A cold voice calls out Raha's name, and her heart stills. Emperor Karzan stands silhouetted in a bright doorway, his shadow falling over her in the chained form of Shed. Karzan demands to know what she is doing there. Unflinching, Raha calmly explains that she was simply visiting the Holy Land. He steps closer, the air growing thick with unspoken history. He holds up a small, silvery branch, asking if she remembers it. He reminds her of a childhood memory, how she once adored this tree and wanted to bring it to the Empire. A soft, nostalgic smile plays on Karzan's lips. He confesses he thought she had disappeared, and for that, he nearly unleashed his fury on all the high priests. Unfazed, Raha looks up at him with a serene smile of her own, promising she won't vanish. Karzan pulls her into a tight, possessive embrace, his voice a low whisper against her ear. He reminds her she cannot run away after taking those faded blue eyes. With a final, chilling touch to her cheek, he states that because of her, the Empire is protected, and no one dares challenge him. Karzan's touch is cold as his fingers grip Raha's chin, forcing her gaze upward. He comments on the scent of crimson lingering in the air, a grim perfume rising from the fallen men around them. His hand slides down to her waist, pulling her possessively against him. A wicked smile spreads across his face as his eyes flicker toward Shed. He announces that all 16 surviving captives, including Shed, are now hers. With a glint of malice, he declares them a gift, a collection of attendants for her private chambers. Raha's expression remains a flawless mask of ice. Karzan's voice is deceptively calm as he warns that the marking of the sigil might be a bit painful. Before the stunned court, his guards force the 16 captives to the ground. The sharp scent of burnt skin fills the air as a glowing iron presses the imperial mark onto their backs, drawing cries of agony that echo through the hall. An elderly noble shouts a protest at the emperor's cruelty, his voice trembling with shock. Unmoved, Karzan simply watches the scene unfold, a faint, chilling smile gracing his lips. The high priest's words curl around Raha as he justifies the emperor's cruelty. To protect the princess with the sacred blue eyes of succession, every servant must bear the sigil. An image flashes of searing iron meeting flesh, a magical mark burned over the heart to ensure no harm befalls her. He confirms that men have survived this, though Raha knows the truth. Over 100 have been marked and sent to her private chambers this way, yet none have ever lasted more than a single week. His chilling voice simply hopes the new ones are lucky. A voice calls for a toast to reconciliation and peace. As nobles raise their glasses, some with unease, Raha quietly lifts her own, the gesture feeling cold and hollow. The forced pleasantries of the court fade, leaving her alone in the vast silence of her chambers. She sits huddled on the floor before the new captive. The priest's cruel words echo in her mind, that this one, like all the others, won't last long. But in the heavy air between princess and prisoner, a strange warmth flickers, a silent, unspoken challenge to fate. The air in the chamber feels thick, heavy with an unspoken warmth. Raha rises slowly, her dress rustling in the profound silence. As her hands fumble, a strip of cloth flutters to the marble floor. Her gaze traces the sigil on Shed's chest, the scars that map his body. He's just like the others, she thinks, recognizing the familiar signs, the shallow breaths, the skin growing pale. Her hand lifts, drawn to him. Her fingers gently press against his cheek, the unexpected warmth a stark contrast to the cold she expected. This, she remembers, is what she always did. She thought this warmth, this connection, would let them live. A weary thought drifts through Raha's mind as she lies beside him on the vast bed. She is tired of watching them perish. Her hand gently strokes the intricate sigil on Shed's chest. She admits to herself that she envies his potential escape from the palace, even through such a final, grim exit. Suddenly, his hand snaps up, seizing her wrist in an unbreakable grip. Raha's blue eyes fly wide with shock. In a single, powerful motion, he reverses their positions, looming over her. The air crackles with intensity as he demands, "Why did you feed me your blood?" Shed's voice is tight with confusion as he hovers over Raha, demanding to know what she has done to him. He asks why she fed him her vitality. Unfazed, Raha looks up into his intense eyes and explains the nature of the sigil inscribed on his body. It's a magical restraint, controlling his power from the very place closest to his heart, a core wrapped in chains. As she speaks, her slender fingers drift to the glowing mark on his chest. I was curious, she admits softly, explaining that royal blood is said to neutralize its power. Shed's voice is low as he explains that he understands the truth. The men brought to her chambers perish because of the sigil's overwhelming power. The air between them crackles with unspoken tension. He presses her for her true intentions, demanding to know what she desires from him now that she has intervened. Lying beneath his intense gaze, Raha's blue eyes are placid pools. She breathes a simple, devastating answer. Nothing. He questions her, his voice tight with disbelief, but her response remains the same. I desire nothing at all. Raha's gaze remains steady, her hand still resting against the warmth of his chest. She dismisses his intensity, claiming she simply tried something she once heard. Her fingers trail upwards, her touch feather-light as they cup his jaw. What could I possibly want from someone like you? She asks coolly. Suddenly, Shed's hand closes around her slender throat, but no fear registers on Raha's face. Instead, a brilliant, unnerving smile blooms as she looks into his eyes. Her voice is laced with a strange hope as she makes a chilling request. Do you think you could end my life? Shed's hand tightens around Raha's throat, but a knowing look crosses her face. She knew it. He can't follow through. A brilliant, painful light erupts from the sigil on his chest, forcing him to recoil with a sharp gasp. He clutches the burning mark, his strength failing him. Raha calmly explains that the sigil interferes, preventing him from exerting enough force to harm her. She looks down at the defeated man now on the floor. I don't know when you will perish, she says, her voice cool and steady. But while you are here, you have only one role. You are a servant who obeys his master. Her piercing blue eyes leave no room for argument. Raha's voice is a soft murmur as she looks into Shed's eyes, telling him she can see the raw anger he holds for her and Karzan, but also the deep resignation to his fate. The air crackles with unspoken tension as she lifts her bare foot, slowly tracing a path along his powerful thigh. He flinches at her touch, a sharp, involuntary shudder running through him. She continues the motion, her foot stroking his leg as she delivers her decree. You must attend to me at night, she says, a sharp, knowing smile gracing her lips, well enough to appease Karzan. Shed turns away, a heavy sigh escaping him. A look of grim determination settles on Shed's face. As you wish, he says, his voice a low rumble. He swiftly pulls Raha into a firm embrace, his powerful arms encircling her as his hand gently cradles her jaw. He closes the distance between them, a palpable heat rising as their lips meet in a moment of charged surrender. The soft fabric of her gown slips away as their connection deepens, her quiet sigh lost in the air as they fall into the shadows of the chamber, completely consumed by the night. All those vile rumors he had heard about the princess, he now wonders if they were completely false. Raha's mind drifts into a disorienting, snowy memory. A much younger version of herself, clutching a stuffed rabbit, wanders barefoot and alone. She calls out into the desolate woods, her voice trembling as she says she wants to return to the palace. A deep, chilling voice suddenly echoes, declaring that she must be punished. An imposing, shadowy figure with glowing eyes looms over her, accusing her of taking Karzan's eyes. As tears fall from her own brilliant blue eyes, the voice insists she must pay the price. A tiny, terrified apology escapes her lips. Lost in a chilling memory, a young Raha cries out in the snow, her small hands raw from the cold. Her stuffed rabbit lies abandoned as she pleads for her mother's forgiveness, promising she will do anything. Suddenly, a gentle hand cups her cheek, and she looks up, startled, as someone with pale hair pulls her into a secure embrace. The frigid winter landscape melts away, transforming into a sunlit meadow of flowers. It is Shed, kneeling and holding her with unexpected warmth. Her mind reels with a single, hazy question. Who? Raha stirs in the warm morning light, nestled securely against Shed's chest. A hazy thought surfaces. No dream has ever ended like this before. Her hand gently strokes his pale hair as the reality of their night together sinks in, a feeling like she was possessed by something unreal. A sudden jolt runs through her, and her eyes snap open. She finds Shed already awake, his gaze fixed on her. She starts to ask when he woke, but his quiet voice cuts through the stillness. "Ready now?" he asks, the question hanging in the charged air between them. Sunlight streams into the room as Shed looks down at Raha, his voice low as he asks if she's ready. Flustered, Raha clutches the sheet to her chest, stammering as she asks what he means. His hand covers hers, and she wonders aloud if the time they spent together all night wasn't enough. He stares at her for a moment before clarifying he's talking about breakfast. Realization washes over Raha, her face flushing a deep red. Shed notes it's nearly noon, then gently grips her arm, remarking it's no wonder she's so thin with such an irregular lifestyle. Stunned, Raha simply declares him rude. Raha's gaze lingers on Shed as he stands bathed in the morning light. She realizes he lives by a rhythm she has long forgotten. A memory from the pre-dawn quiet surfaces, Shed gently trying to wake her, his voice a low rumble asking her to eat. She remembers sleepily pushing him away, telling him to rest. He had simply chuckled, a warm, amused sound. Now, looking down at her with the same gentleness in his eyes, he offers again, "Let's have breakfast." A surprising warmth spreads through her chest. At the grand dining table, Raha watches Shed with an analytical gaze. She tells him that with no servants, he must help himself. As he eats, his refined manners and the scars crisscrossing his body paint a vivid picture in her mind. An image of a noble knight, kneeling in devotion, solidifies her suspicion. Breaking the quiet moment, she offers him champagne. Shed politely refuses. "Suit yourself," Raha murmurs, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. Staring at her own reflection in the bubbling liquid, she remarks on how unlucky he is to have been captured. Shed's gaze is unwavering as he counters her pity, stating that true misfortune would have been perishing before ever reaching her. Raha agrees coolly, comparing him to the others who fell. With a sharp edge to her voice, she asks how it felt to watch his comrades be defeated. His silverware clatters against the plate. He questions her intent, observing that she seems to be trying to provoke his anger. Then, "Are you not going to get angry?" Raha challenges. "You're not the one I want to be angry at," he says, the words hanging in the air. A strange warmth spreads through Raha's chest. It's odd. His rationality is unshakable. Raha's thoughts race as she studies Shed. His eyes are a striking bluish gray, an unsettling combination of her own faded blue and Karzan's royal gray. A sudden, dangerous idea forms. She warns him never to raise his head before the Emperor, cautioning that Karzan's rage is unpredictable and violent. "Got it," Shed replies, his calm completely unruffled. Raha starts to command him further, but hesitates, a glint in her eye. She realizes the peculiar amusement in a mere knight attendant treating her with the same casualness as the Emperor himself. Raha sets a new rule for him. Outside her chambers, he must only speak formally to her and the Emperor, but when they are alone, he may address her as he pleases. Shed simply nods, his calm acceptance catching her off guard. His easy compliance is a stark contrast to his defiance the night before. Suddenly, her composure shatters. A memory, hot and vivid, crashes over her. The scene dissolves into a blur of tangled limbs and shared warmth. Back in the present, a deep flush colors her cheeks. Trying to regain her composure, she asks for his name, wondering if he's just a nameless test subject. He recalls being called 192. Then, meeting her gaze, he answers plainly. "Shane." The name hangs in the air between them, a quiet revelation. "Shane," she repeats softly. A dangerous smile plays on Raha's lips as she warns Shed to keep his wits about him, wondering with a thrill how Karzan will react to this turn of events. Later, the mood shifts. She sits in a grand, cold hall when her brother's voice calls her name. Karzan approaches, his fingers tracing the laces on her arm as he notes she looks livelier than usual. Raha's expression remains like ice. He leans closer, a malicious glint in his eye, asking if he's interrupting her time with her new companion. Emperor Karzan speaks his sister's name, his touch light against the delicate lace of her sleeve. He observes that she looks livelier than usual, a cruel smile playing on his lips as he asks if he is intruding on her time with her new companion. Overlooking the grand hall from their thrones, he pretends to show concern, suggesting she must be upset about the banquet. Raha turns to him, a placid smile on her face. She assures her brother that she isn't upset at all, remarking that since he is no betrothed, it is only right that she is present. Emperor Karzan smirks, calling Raha his ever-thoughtful twin sister. With a serene smile, Raha leans in, her voice a soft murmur. She explains it's because she knows he likes hearing words that imply she could one day take the mantle of his betrothed. Her chilling blue eyes then sweep over the banquet hall below. An elderly guest meets her gaze for a fleeting moment before nervously looking away. Across the room, a noblewoman rises from her seat, announcing to her companion that she will go and greet the other guests. "As you wish, my dear sister," Curzon concedes, his voice a low hum. A faint, knowing smile plays on Raha's lips as she turns from the throne. She gracefully descends the staircase, leaving her brother to watch from his solitary seat as she moves into the heart of the banquet. She approaches the high priest, offering a polite evening greeting that stills the surrounding chatter. Another noblewoman, dressed lavishly, interjects with a bright smile, asking why the priest is empty-handed when the finest wine has been prepared in his honor. The high priest simply listens, his expression grim. The high priest stands firm, explaining that his faith forbids him from drinking wine at this time. A quiet ah of understanding escapes Raha's lips. Without a moment's hesitation, she summons a servant to fetch tea. As it arrives, she gracefully takes a glass for herself, remarking that it's perfect, as she prefers tea anyway. With the air between them still, she turns her full attention to the priest. Her voice is a soft invitation as she asks if he would humor her with his conversation for a while. As the high priest sits with Raha, his thoughts drift to the old emperor, for whom the Holy Land was a constant thorn in his side. He remembers the grand palace, reconstructed in a futile, vain attempt to surpass the divine. It was a truth that ultimately shattered the emperor's spirit, as he could never rival the power of the priests themselves. The memory fractures when a sharp voice echoes nearby, calling out for number 192. The high priest flinches, his teacup trembling in his grasp as the past collides with the present. Raha's voice is a steady calm as she assures the high priest that the man he asked about is alive and well. He looks down, quietly agreeing, noting the man is so healthy he could be devoured whole. A soft, "I see," escapes Raha's lips, but her mind is racing. The genuine concern in the priest's eyes confirms a suspicion that sparks within her. Shed is not just a disposable pawn in this game. Her own gaze sharpens as she advises him to better control his expressions, leaving him momentarily stunned as she turns away, wondering why the Holy Land is involved. Raha's mind pieces together a chilling theory. The Holy Land is creating a weapon. Her gaze intensifies as she lays out her deductions for the stunned high priest. She notes that while Curzon rampages, the Holy Land is the one place he cannot completely crush. Her voice lowers, a dangerous murmur, as she connects her faded blue eyes to his experiment, suggesting that perhaps a closer intimacy is needed to achieve his goals. As her lace-gloved hand reaches out to touch his cup, she warns him to correct his attitude. Curzon is always watching. The cup slips from his grasp and shatters. The high priest's reflection distorts in the dark liquid spilled across the table. "Oh dear," Raha murmurs, her voice deceptively soft. "You must be careful." Her piercing blue eyes fix on him as she delivers a final, chilling warning. He must be extra careful if he wants to protect his precious test subject. Miles away, Shed stands shirtless before an ornate mirror, his scarred back reflecting a history of conflict. His hand tightens around the hilt of a small, sharp blade, the polished steel gleaming under the faint light. His gaze is cold and resolute. Raha walks through the silent hall, feeling utterly drained, but thankful her brother let her go early. Waving her attendants away, she dismisses them for the night. As she approaches her chambers, her thoughts drift to the captive within, wondering if Shed is asleep. The door creaks open, and she stops in the entryway. Shed stands in the moonlight, his physique on full display, but it's not that which makes her gasp. His hair, once a striking silver, is now a deep, dark color. Your hair," she stammers. He turns, revealing a strange mark over his heart, and calmly asks, "Oh, that?" Shed gestures to the silver locks on the table, explaining calmly that his hair was bothering him, so he cut it. Later, the air grows warm and heavy as Raha sinks into her steaming bath. Shed waits silently nearby, his gaze unreadable. Though only his hair has changed, she feels as if she's looking at a different man entirely. Breaking the quiet, Raha's voice is soft but direct. She observes that he seems quite familiar with attending to someone's bath, asking if this is truly his first time performing such a duty. Shed's voice is steady as he confirms he has done this a few times before. Raha is silent for a long moment, her hand stirring the surface of the water. With a challenging look, she invites him to join her, questioning what kind of attendant would dare to stare so openly at his master. His expression remains unreadable. Without a word, he turns and lets his garments fall to the floor. The water ripples as he steps into the bath, moving through the thick steam until he is directly before her, their connection deepening in the heavy silence. In the steaming water, Shed grips Raha's ankle, his touch firm. He observes that her legs are stiff. Raha flinches as his hand slides up her calf, quietly explaining that she was standing for a long time in the cold. He asks why she always wears such thin clothing. Her gaze becomes distant, her voice soft as she calls the garments her armor for battle. His touch gentles as he questions her heavy earrings. Those, Raha confesses, I think of them as shackles. The moment hangs between them before she asks if he saw the high priests today. Not really, he replies. Shed muses that the high priests must be very busy people. He notes that Karzan seemed anxious for their safe return, but with the blizzard blowing, they might not make it back. The chilling memory of a small girl collapsed on a cold, dark floor vanishes, leaving Raha looking haunted in the steaming water. Shed's hand rises, gently tucking a strand of her dark hair back. He tells her that while he doesn't know what she's endured, she doesn't need to be held back by the past. His touch shifts to the heavy earring she called a shackle. A nightmare is just a nightmare, he murmurs, his gaze steady. It cannot consume your reality. He carefully unclasps the jewel, and her wide blue eyes meet his, stunned. The water splashes as Raha rises, her gaze locking with Shed's. Are you just going to keep staring? She asks, her voice a low challenge in the steam. He pulls her closer, their bodies meeting in the warm water. A soft breath escapes her lips as her hand finds his jaw. Raha releases a soft breath, her body relaxing into the quiet warmth of the moment. A single tear escapes her closed eye as she clings to a newfound peace. Outside, snow falls silently past the window, and she thinks to herself that, honestly, she could fall asleep like this and never wake up. Later, a man with sharp features and a chilling smile approaches her. Your Highness, he says, his gaze assessing. He notes that since she's up so early, she must have had a pleasant night with her chamber companion. He smirks, answering his own insinuation with a simple, menacing, yes. A steward presents Raha with an ornate box, announcing it's a gift from the Emperor for tonight's banquet. The lid clicks open, revealing a dazzling set of jewels that sparkle under the light. But Raha's expression is cold. She says she will return the necklace she received before. The steward tries to insist it was a gift, but she cuts him off. With a sharp gaze, she declares it was a loan, asking pointedly if such a precious item shouldn't belong to the future empress. Stunned by her defiance, he quietly agrees to its return. A maid rushes to Raha's side, her voice full of urgency. Your Highness, you must go to your dressing room. You'll be late. But Raha's thoughts linger on the head steward, the emperor's loyal dog. The memory of his gaze, which always teeters on the edge of propriety, makes her feel ill. Later, in the golden warmth of her dressing room, an attendant adjusts the fit of an elegant gown. The air is thick with the soft murmurs of the staff, their whispers following her like shadows as she is prepared for the night's tense affair. The doors to the dressing room burst open, and Raha's blue eyes widen in alarm. A maid stammers as Emperor Karzan strides in, his imperious gaze sweeping over the scene. He comments coolly that she's taking longer than usual. Raha, standing in her partially fitted gown, offers to escort him to the reception room, but he cuts her off. No need, Karzan declares, settling onto a couch with a proprietary air. I will wait here. Continue on. A thin, fragile smile touches Raha's lips. Sure, brother. Her heart pounds, a cold relief washing over her that his last visit left no visible traces. The air in the room grows heavy under Karzan's watchful eye. Hurry up, Raha whispers to the attendant lacing her gown. She can feel his foul mood from across the room, wondering what fool could have provoked him. For him to barge in like this, the matter must have been sensitive. Suddenly, the laces are pulled brutally tight, and a sharp, pained gasp escapes her lips. The small sound cuts through the thick silence. Karzan's gaze locks onto her. Raha, he calls out, his voice dangerously soft. What was that sound just now? Emperor Karzan lets out a sharp breath, his hand tightening into a fist. Across the hall, someone asks about the sudden noise. Princess Raha explains that she felt a wave of suffocation wash over her. The feeling sparks a memory for Karzan. He sees himself standing behind his sister, his hand near her throat. He recalls whispering that he never knew such a sound could escape her when something is too tight. A cruel smirk plays on his lips as he remembers pulling the straps of her dress, constricting her in his grasp. The warmth from Karzan's memory fades as he takes his sister's hand in his. Raha mentions the banquet is about to begin, asking if he truly expects her to attend looking like this. A knowing smirk plays on Karzan's lips. He pulls her into a close embrace, his arms circling her waist as he reminds her that her only role is to appear perfect by his side. The atmosphere shifts, growing colder as he leans in to ask if she plans to approach the high priest again. His grip on her tightens, a silent warning. Karzan's voice is low as he remarks on her heart-to-heart with Shed. Before her, a jewelry box opens, revealing a brilliant necklace. A flicker of unease crosses Raha's face as she asks what he means. She dismisses his probing question, insisting they barely spoke. She only wanted to understand why someone would commit such terrible acts, she explains, her voice trailing off. The unspoken accusation hangs heavy in the air. As she reflects on this cruelty, Karzan's hand gently closes over hers, a possessive warmth that steals the breath from her lungs. The warmth of Karzan's thumb stroking over her skin feels like a brand. He presses for information, asking if the high priest gave her an answer. Raha looks away, explaining that the man went as white as a sheet, unable to utter a single word. A knowing smile touches Karzan's lips. I see. He lifts a glittering hand ornament from its box, letting the jewels catch the light. He warns her to be cautious, reminding her that he can't brand sigils on the hearts of priests, a chilling hint at his absolute power over others. Karzan steps closer, his voice a low murmur against her hair. He tells her that when it comes to her, she knows how he feels. His hand settles on her shoulder, a possessive warmth that sends a shiver down her spine. Leaning in, his lips brush against her neck in a soft, chilling caress as his hands move to fasten the glittering necklace he brought. The cold metal feels like a collar. Yes, Raha breathes, her voice barely a whisper. She understands his meaning perfectly. From across the hall, Oliver watches them, a strained smile fixed on his face. At a lavish banquet, nobles shower Raha with praise, commenting on how radiant she appears. The polite chatter shifts as a blonde woman leans in, her words laced with insinuation. She mentions the emperor's plan to host a banquet to find a match, then pointedly wonders if any suitor could ever come between siblings who are so very close. A man laughs, agreeing. He remarks that while all of Karzan's other half-siblings were cast aside, he cherishes Raha dearly. The court whispers how lucky she is to be the emperor's favorite, the sole recipient of his singular, possessive affection. Amidst the fawning praise, a nobleman raises his glass, declaring that even the emperor must be swayed by Raha's astounding beauty. Laughter echoes through the room, but Raha's sharp gaze cuts through the flattery. She quietly asks why no one is drinking, pointing out their glasses are filled only with water. The nobles stammer weak excuses, but she sees the truth in their nervous smiles. Lies, she thinks, clutching her own wine glass. They are not abstaining out of politeness. They are simply terrified of falling out of Karzan's favor. A woman secretly observes her accomplice, relieved that he keeps his expression carefully neutral. She was worried he might inadvertently reveal their plot to Karzan. Later, flower petals drift through the air as Raha walks, a bouquet clutched in her hand. Her striking blue eyes are sharp, taking in the scene before her. A man with long, dark hair and a monocle stands in her path, his expression unreadable and intense. The atmosphere thickens with unspoken history as his smooth voice breaks the silence. It's been a while, Your Highness. The air stills as a familiar voice greets Princess Raha. Her striking blue eyes widen with sudden realization as she stands on the balcony, a glass of wine in her hand. Is it today? She murmurs, the question hanging in the space between them. The gentleman confirms her thought, presenting a bouquet of muted flowers. It is the anniversary of Countess Bourbon's passing. Raha accepts the offering, a fragile smile gracing her lips as she thanks him for the constant remembrance. He dismisses her gratitude gently, his gaze steady, explaining it was his sister's final wish. The gentleman asks if Raha can honor her former nanny's last wish. Her grip tightens on the bouquet as she quietly agrees. A cold wave of guilt washes over her, the thought echoing in her mind. The nanny would still be alive if not for her. The haunting memory of a woman collapsed on the floor surfaces. Later, An attendant compliments her, calling her as beautiful as a doll before departing. The words are hollow. From the shadows, Shed watches her, his intense gaze a palpable warmth that cuts through the chilling air of the palace. Shed leans against the cold stone, a phantom warning echoing in his thoughts. Raha's voice, a memory both intimate and dangerous, forbids him from ever entering the West Wing. He clutches a fresh wound on his own chest as crimson suddenly pools from under a heavy door nearby. He grits his teeth in frustration. Guards rush to erase the scene, their hushed panic filling the corridor as they work to dispose of another victim. From the shadows, Shed watches, the heat from his injury a stark reminder of the princess's deadly domain. A cold glance from Emperor Karzan slices through the room. The bouquet slips from Raha's fingers, its pale blossoms scattering on the stone floor. She stands isolated, a silhouette against the stark winter light, finding the entire affair so irritating. The cloying scent of flowers and the hollow laughter of the nobles press in from all sides. Watched by 100 pairs of judgmental eyes, she feels herself sinking, overwhelmed by the stifling attention. Trapped and unable to act, a single question burns in her wide, haunted eyes. Why? A single question haunts Raha as she stands alone in the cold hall. Why is she still alive? Her gaze falls upon a grim sight, another fallen captive. Through a nearby doorway, Shed listens as the physician Oliver explains the Emperor's cruel decree. The body must remain until it decays, a process slowed by a powerful sigil. Oliver nervously suggests this one's sigil seems faulty and offers to remove the captive on Shed's command. A cold fire burns behind Shed's eyes as he remains silent, his intense presence filling the space between them. A chilling memory surfaces in Raha's mind. She is back on that cold, ornate throne, forced by Karzan to witness the final moments of the men sent to her. She watches them as their hope drains away, their skin growing pale with each fading breath. The memory sharpens, focusing on one man. He reaches for her as his strength fails, collapsing into her lap. He grips her hands tightly, a strange, feverish light in his eyes as he utters his final curse. Her name, whispered like a prayer. Raha, Raha del Halsa. The memory sharpens, Karzan's voice dripping with false pity for his poor twin, a caged bird powerless beneath his might. A raw cry escapes Raha's lips as a fire she can no longer contain ignites. She lunges from the throne, her hands closing around her brother's throat. He crashes to the floor, a wild, ecstatic smile spreading across his face. A harsh laugh escapes him as her grip tightens. Gazing up at her tear-streaked face, he asks, "Do you want to end me, Raha?" He finds her unleashed fury beautiful. "You are truly exquisite." A chilling smile spreads across Karzan's face as Raha's hands tighten around his throat. He finds her fury exquisite. A shiver of pure hatred courses through Raha. She loathes all of it. A sharp cough cuts through the suffocating memory, and suddenly she is above Shed, her hands wrapped around his neck. "Won't you let go?" he rasps. His hand gently rises to cup her tear-stained cheek, his touch a startling warmth against her cold rage. She screams down at him, her voice cracking, "Don't get cocky, captive." Raha's heart pounds as she silently warns him not to get cocky. With a frustrated sigh, she slides from the bed, leaving a stunned Shed to watch her go. He takes a step back, his hand instinctively touching the mark on his neck as if it still burns. The fabric of her dress rustles as she collapses into a chair, completely overwhelmed. She thinks she must be losing her mind, annoyed that their earlier conversation is now haunting her. He closes the distance between them, his voice soft as he speaks her name, Raha. Raha glares up at him from her chair, her voice sharp. She commands him not to stand above her line of sight or to speak her name so casually. She asks if he intends to sleep right there. "Yes," Shed confirms, dropping to one knee before her. He tells her to mind her own business. With a soft rustle of fabric, he pulls off his dark shirt, revealing the scarred expanse of his chest. He gently drapes it over her shoulders, a silent offering of warmth. Stunned, Raha stares down, her mind racing. "Who are you?" she wonders. "To pity me?" Raha's fingers tighten on the dark fabric he gave her. She confronts him, her voice a low murmur, pointing out that he understood her desire for him to leave, yet he still stays. The air crackles with unspoken questions as she finally asks if he doesn't want to escape this place. For a moment, her resolve wavers. A memory surfaces of a desolate cage, a time when such words would have made her heart tremble with the impossible dream of rescue, a fragile hope she has long since buried deep within her. However, a soft touch on Shed's shoulder belies her true intent. In a flash, her hand strikes his cheek, the sharp sound echoing in the chamber. He remains still, his cool eyes meeting hers as he remarks that she has overstepped. His calm defiance ignites her fury. Raha's fingers twist into his pale hair, dragging him down until he falls beneath her. Looming over him with a chilling smile, she reminds him that he seems to have forgotten his place. It is time, she purrs, for him to act his part. Shed's hand suddenly closes around the delicate fabric of Raha's sleeve. He meets her condescending smile with a cool gaze, questioning her actions. She leans closer, demanding he respond, but he simply asks what use her little performance is. His grip tightens, a silent warning. If she wants to continue this charade, he tells her, then he will play along. With a sudden, powerful tug, he pulls her down. The world tilts, and Raha finds herself flush against him, his warmth radiating through her gown. Her breath hitches, heart hammering as he holds her close. In one swift, powerful movement, Shed sweeps Raha into his arms, pressing her against the cold stone of the corridor wall. The air crackles with intensity as his lips find the delicate skin of her neck, his touch sending a tremor through her. Her fine jewelry clatters to the floor, forgotten. As his hand presses against her, a breathless plea escapes her. "Oh, wait," Raha protests, her voice tight. "This place, it's too uncomfortable." He breathes heavily, his intense blue eyes locked on hers, the heat between them undeniable. Shed gently lowers Raha to the cold stone floor, her dark hair pooling around her. He leans close, his voice a low whisper, promising that lying down won't save her from this moment. His touch is a discovery, and he observes her fervent response, warning that this will only heighten the feeling between them. Raha flinches as his hand grasps her waist, his grip firm and unyielding. In one powerful, definitive motion, their bodies connect. Hey, thanks for watching this chapter breakdown on Manhwa Fury. I spent hours day and night cutting, scripting, and editing just for you to dive into the story with zero fluff. If you love this ride, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss the next epic recap. And while you're here, check out the video on screen now, or link below, for the next wild twist you won't believe. I'll see you in the next one. Fury out.